So first of all, thank you everyone for taking the time out and joining us on this insightful session today. We've been trying to put this together over the last few weeks, trying to get time from our valuable panelists over here. And finally, we've got the day and time fixed. So we're happy to actually have this conversation. And hopefully the people who are joining us can pick up some insights or some crucial insights from our panelists today. The reason why we've actually arranged this masterclass is because I think we are at a stage where customers now have unprecedented number of ways to engage with different companies, and everything is happening in real time, which is why we are now at a stage when we're talking to companies, we are realizing the ones who can offer immediacy, personalization, and accessibility to their customers are in the path to actually win in the long term. Now, to get more insights on how do we actually make this happen, how do we deliver these exceptional customer experiences, I have two friends of mine with me. Let me introduce you to Mark Fu, who is driving Fast Jobs, Singapore's #1 mobile job app, which is also a part of Singapore Press Holdings Group. Mark is a VP of Technology and Product, and ever since I've seen him or known him, he's super hands-on with technology. He still shows the same enthusiasm that if an intern would show when they would look at a new platform to try and understand it. So I'm sure there can be a lot of practical learnings that are under his belt, which we can try and extract from him today. Mark has spent many years in the past working under Singapore Press Holdings Group, and now, like I mentioned, is with Fast Jobs. Mark, thank you so much for taking the time out today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And then moving focus to my friend Vasudevaraman Venkataraman, fondly known as Vasu. So if anyone has questions for him, just use Vasu as the word. He's the head of platform growth for Singapore's go-to place for groceries, NTUC Fair Price. Over the last 10 years, Vasu's had a strong blend of retail, e-commerce, and business experience combined with deep analytics and expertise. He, of course, totally loves numbers. He's a very analytical person and has a very strong tech background. So he's worked with major brands like Myntra, Cognizant, Wells Fargo in the past. He's implemented some exceptional pieces of technology in some of these brands. Again, lots of insights that we are looking forward to getting from Vasu. Vasu, thanks again for joining us today. I know you've broken your leg while playing the sport, but thank you for still making this happen.
Thanks for having me, Amal. It's a pleasure.
Superb, superb. So let's kick off the session. We have jumped up to 25 attendees. Again, all the attendees, thank you for taking time out this afternoon. And we are going to begin our discussion with Mark and Vasu. I think when I look at the current situation and when I speak to a lot of brands, fortunately, most of them want to put the customers first, and it's already at the center of their strategy. However, almost 79 or 80% of companies admit that the world situation that we have all been experiencing has helped them increase the budget. So COVID has kind of had a slightly positive impact on the digital transformation element, where the budgets have gone up. But despite the forecast, actually, we are still in a stage where the adoption is a bit slow. There's still some sort of apprehension. And I think that's something we want to demystify again in today's conversation. So to begin with, I think when Mark and Vasu, especially when I come across many of the brands who are kind of digital first, or even traditional brands who are suddenly now realizing the importance of omnichannel engagement, what are some of the suggestions that you have in terms of what should a brand be doing when they're starting omnichannel marketing or engagement? If you have to go back in time and you had to kind of rework the entire customer engagement framework, process, metrics for some sort of a new or old brand, what are some of the things that you would do? And if you would do something differently, then why? It's quite a loaded question, but I think it will help you share a lot more insight. So maybe Vasu, we can begin with you first. How's your experience been, and what are some of the suggestions you have around that?
So if there's one thing that, of course, I would go back in time, I think it's the crucial part is about getting the engagement or the retention metric itself right. I think that's the core to this. Primarily because I guess a lot of things actually depend on this, right? So your investments, your tech, hiring, everything kind of revolves around getting this metric right. And there is no one metric fits all approach. So it's really about getting to understand your business right instead of going ahead with one metric that everybody keeps talking about, right? So if I were to take an example like MAU, for example, right? So it's one of the most used as well as abused, metric. I mean, if I were to break it down like MAU, monthly active user. So monthly, I mean, would that be your right natural frequency for your product or offering, right? So it could be daily or weekly if it's a grocery, daily if it's a social network, and so on and so forth. So what's the natural frequency? And how about active? What's the definition of active, right? So does it mean just stepping onto the platform or doing an order or the trip? What's the core user action for the product and the user, right? So like, again, like looking at different segments, the metric could be different for the new user versus a subscriber to a loyal customer. So how do you kind of break this down, right? So that I think will be the crux or the foundation to this, where we kind of want to get the metric right, after which everything else kind of builds on top of it.
Yeah. I do agree with Vasu. So the definition of metric has to be very clear. So if I were to go back in time when I first started this, so I have the blessing of being given an opportunity to start an incubation within SPH. In this case, that's Fast Shops. All right. So a lot of time we engage something when we start something, we focus on building, and the actual measuring seems to take a secondary role. So, and what I meant by that is we are busy churning out outputs, to engage with the customer without knowing whether it's doing well or not well. So the interesting thing sometimes is I share with my team, hey, we cannot go on doing this. So we must be very clear where exactly is our endpoint and how we're going to measure that. Right. So this is as per what Vasu has shared. The definition of metric must be very clear. Unfortunately, I'm coming from a product management perspective, it's not an easy job. In our academic years, we learn different SI units, all right, according to international standard units like kilometer per hour is measurement of speed. And how should I put it? Your weight is measured, or mass is measured in kilogram or Newton. Right. Unfortunately, when it comes to the product management world, the MAU is, in the last 6 years, probably is a very popular term. Everybody's looking at it. The bounce rate was back in the early days in the .com period. Bounce rate, everybody want our bounce rate. So there are a lot of metrics coming in, and unfortunately, I was hoping there was going to be a dictionary of very clear what it means and how it's going to be applied. So if you want to start something, you must have a very clear building plan as well as a plan to measure the metrics so that you will know where is your angle. So there's always a famous saying that you cannot manage something that you actually can't measure. So that is also why we actually, one of the things that we do is really explore an arsenal of different tools that actually help us. Now, after having a very clear definition of the metrics that you do or want to achieve, you need tools to actually help you to achieve that. And having one is actually not good enough because they are for different purpose out there in the market. So we have probably things like audience marketing tool for segmentation. We have Google Analytics, which is very common for measuring MAU like this. We also have analytics like, the conversion rates, even among ourselves as a product. Because I'm from jobs, we look at application conversion. We look at impression to view. So these are the different things to look at. And these are the different tools that will actually help. There are different tools out there that will actually help you to do that.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah, I think that's a great perspective. And this is why we wanted to bring in a bit of a product and tech perspective, because oftentimes marketing wants to do some of these things, but eventually needs support from the product teams to be able to make the tech work together, right? So it's good to get that perspective as to what we need and how do we go about it. So having a definitive metric that you want to track and having an end objective or an end goal or a clear end point is basically some of the key points that we need to follow when we are establishing this omnichannel strategy. Is there any moment that comes to your minds where you all were trying to do something and it did not work or it worked? Was there a eureka moment for any of you all during this process, which we could learn from? Does anything come to mind, just out of curiosity?
Oh, that the whole question around the metric itself has been a kind of a journey of a discovery or a journey, right? So where you start off with absolutely probably the wrong or the irrelevant metric, and you tend to optimize for it, and then you later realize that, hey, your fundamentals are not moving, and then you kind of get back to the drawing board, and then eventually get wiser over time, right? So
yeah. So for us, actually, the experience we have is, metrics is very interesting. After having a very clear definition, one thing that really helped us was actually to define our journey, our user journey very clearly before we can plot which metric along which journey that you have. So and there's also one part that I would say that when it works, it's not so much of probably also defining a metric. It's really who actually own the metrics. So an example, marketing, when it comes to marketing, awareness, amplification of the brand, bringing in the users is very clear. So MAU itself, I'm just going to do this illustration, is MAU itself, it comes in two forms. There are new users, they are actually old users, returning users. And returning users are primarily very talking about retention metrics. So if you run a lot of marketing campaign, yes, it does influence the, what they call that, the returning user through the other form engagement. Your campaign, when you engage them, you must be very clear which sector does it actually affect. You could be looking at the number in totality. I think you have to further slice it up, which campaign actually works for which numbers. So what I'm saying here is in the process of doing all these things, we are also segmenting our work scope to be very clear, so that we, different team will own the different metric and work towards a common goal. That's what we do. Yeah. So these are some of the challenges when we face initially, when everybody is measuring the same metric without a very clear definition and accountability.
Superb. I think that you raise a very important point where who owns the metrics, because throughout the journey, there are different elements which are owned by different teams, and where does the ownership stop and then transition happens. And that's where also there could be an area where the ball drops in many cases. So organizations should be looking out to ensuring these are clearly defined before they start embarking on this journey. Fabulous thoughts over there. Brings me to one of the points, Mark, you raised is about creating journeys, right? So of course, to deliver a great omnichannel experience, customer insights are super critical. And then once you understand these insights, then you want to be able to segment them with more advanced segmentation capabilities, and then finally put them in a journey or create these journeys where you're helping the users automatically go through a process, and all that in journey is completely personalized as well. Can you mention a bit more on how are you managing this at the moment? And is there any particular tech stack that you're using to support this? Also, how do you understand customer segments and their behaviors and the touch points that they are active on, and what sort of jobs in your case that they are interacting on, and in Vasu's case, maybe what products or product categories that they are interacting with, so you can start recommending those kind of jobs or those kind of products accordingly. Will be good to understand a bit more on that, if you all can share and shed some light on.
So just give me a minute. I'm trying to break it. This is a very big question and overloaded.
Yes.
So
let me cut it short. So basically, I want to understand, or I want the audience to also understand, what's the best way to manage journeys and flows, and be able to create some journeys which actually work. Because oftentimes when we speak to brands, they say, oh yes, I do have journeys, but then the journeys are not working. I mean, journeys should be working technically. So where could those gaps be? And how do you think through this, or what sort of technologies do you use to make that happen?
So maybe I do a little bit back into the early days when we start up small and we have limited resources. Probably a lot of startup will encounter this problem. So we start with simple analytics tools. And when we look at the whole journey, we look at it in a very aggregated form, nothing specific to a particular user. All right. So these are the things that we did in the past. And when we break down the journey, we break down in many different parts before looking at the whole thing in totality, so that we can fix things in pretty much like a component. When you fix a car, if the car is broken down in terms of its tire, just fix a tire. Don't send in the whole car. You know what I mean? So we have registration journey. We have the install, all the way from market installation journey, the registration journey, job application journey, that kind of thing. And we look at the different conversion rates when we tap that. So so we use different tools because in a different journey, there are specific information that we wanted to know more about. So there are certain tools, like I said, when we first started with things like probably GA, right? There will be information that we are unknown, correct? Customers bring a group of users, MAU to us is that 300,000 or 400,000 or even a million, but we have no ideas who are they in terms of maybe profile, in terms of male, female, in terms of the age range, or in terms of these are attributes, or in terms of the the way they engage within the system. So we do not have those information. So this is where along the journey, after then measuring those metrics, we actually get to understand our user coming from their attributes and also from the way they engage with our system. And then we actually use other tools then to push out recommendations so that they can more engage with the system. So what I'm saying here is, other than purely looking at numbers, we need to have engagement metrics whereby some of the tools are unable to give us. And after we have those, we need to further break down into some personal profiling information so that we can better respond to their needs and the kind of channel that they follow better. So essentially that's what we do. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that, Mark. Vasu, any thoughts over there? I think you have probably looked at the journey at Myntra, which was more of a scale up, and then you have Fair Price, which is more established, but the digital business scaling up. So different stages, different businesses. What has your journey been like? What are some of the tools you used in the past and then started feeling like, okay, this is not enough. Now I need to move to the next stage, because some brands are always also unsure of when do I need which tool. So if you can share some thoughts on that, that'll be useful for the audience.
And it's an interesting question, because at any given point in time, let's say it's almost like going to a buffet, right? So you have n number of things that you can do, and so many different platforms that are out there, right? And the only problem, like when we go to a buffet, is we have limited time, have limited appetite, in this case, like limited resources or bandwidth and budget, right? So the way I would look at it is kind of deconstruct the entire customer journey bit by bit. Let's say start off all the way from the very first touch point, which is, let's say, something like a marketing attribution kind of a tool, whereby you understand where and how the kind of the users kind of come from and where do they come from, and then go all the way to inside the platform, where you have like product analytics platforms, which kind of help you understand the users and their journeys internally. Then you have experimentation platforms for feature flagging and so on and so forth. Then you have, once the customer steps out, then you have the marketing automation and the engagement automation tools. Then you have platforms for customer feedback, getting all kinds of qualitative customer feedback. Then you have social listening, and then you have some of these full stack ones, right? Like your CDPs or your full stack analytics solutions, which kind of go end to end and establish that view, right? So these are all different pieces to the solutions, and it really then comes down to where or how do you want to prioritize the depth versus breadth versus the effort, as well as the speed that's required, right? There could be specific parts in the journey which are super crucial to your business, which means you go deep and ensure that you have the right platforms. And I also understand that in this kind of a world where some of these platforms start also doing hybrid stuff across, right? So then you need to again like look at breadth versus depth. Is it like you might have a platform which might be doing 2 or 3 things, but then you might need one thing but go a lot deeper, in which case then you go for a very specialized platform and so on and so forth, right? So hence the context, as well as your own core priorities, as well as I think the DNA of the org and the tech stack that is out there are all like crucial factors in deciding, what to go for, whether you buy or build and so on and so forth.
Interesting. I think that's that it's almost saying that, you know, this whole omnichannel strategy is not just about having a competitive advantage. It's more about making it the lifeline for the brand and the customer. So you have to really invest your time to get it right. There's no thumb rule. There's no single platform which can make it happen. And also the companies evolve and get to different stages and have more to deal with. And each time you have to look for the right solution for that particular scale. We actually had a question from Denise, and I think Vasu, you covered a fair bit of how we are able to establish the journey or what are some of the tools. But another important part that Denise is raising here is this, and I come across that very often between brands, CDP, DMP, the confusion and when comes what. Is there anything that you'd like to share around that based on your experience, which can give the audience a bit more clarity around that? It's not the easiest topic to attend to in a short answer, but whatever you could share around that could help.
So I can probably give it a shot, and Mark can, give his perspective. So CDP is more from the perspective of your, first party data, right? So where you would want to get full view across different devices, channels, and so on, full view of your customer, right? So that becomes like the core. Whereas DMP is probably more from the perspective of aggregating a lot of third party data, right? So more from a targeting and paid advertising perspective, right? So then both depends on your use case and what you want to achieve, which decides which route to kind of take.
Superb.
Yeah.
Mark.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I myself sometimes got very confused over the CDP and DMP. I must confess that. But the way at least from my experience, and I look at it is, I'm not sure whether I'm using any DMP honestly, but I use DSP. And when I say DSP, I mean it's really the demand side platform whereby we do acquisition with the marketing team. So a lot of time, this was and that DMP platform actually usually comes with it. So that allow us to target a certain group because we can segment and do that. So we do have some form of aggregation in the past that we do, but it's more DMP, but actually more for the SSP side, whereby we join a network to supply side. But this one is basically, to me, the DMP is a very aggregated data. They could collect all this data across many different website or devices or platform to understand you better and target. But for me, our CDP actually for our product basis, when we use it, is actually like as per what Bas says, it's very first party, it's very close to our heart. Actually, we identify our user better. One of the actual things that we do is actually a lot of time on email targeting. When we do that, we understand we go into a very personalized basis when it comes to CDP, especially. We use more of that. Honestly, the text stack there is really to understand our user. All right, to give them very personalized search in terms of their jobs, and also to give them very personalized or what they call their email recommendations. These are things that we collect their data, their behavior, and use our CDP platform to achieve and engage them. Actually, that's what we do. Yeah.
Awesome. I hope that helps get some more clarity around this. I remember almost all my calls where I've gone into this zone and I've answered some of these questions, and you guys have encompassed it quite well. It's more about the use case. DMP is more from an advertising standpoint and more anonymous visitors. Great. Now, this also brings me to one more question for you all, because everyone's now very excited with too many channels that everyone has access to. So I can just imagine if I was a brand, I would have been going crazy about the app push and in-app messaging and WhatsApp and Line and Kakao, and I don't know what to do, what to start with, how do I prioritize? So with so many channels coming into play and some being in a zone like the WhatsApp and the Line and the Kakaos of the world, where it's still not heavily invested as or infested, I would say, as a marketing channel, but it's still going to be quite effective. It's still an area where we could start getting more returns in the early stages. How are you optimizing your channel mix? When you sit down and you're the guys who have to decide, all right, I'm getting all of these things, but I need to prioritize. What are some of the things that you look to achieve when you, or look towards when you have to kind of come up with a priority list of these channels? Mark, maybe you want to dig in first on this one?
So a little bit of a history again. When we first started, we go for email. It's the cheapest way of getting user. So I'm not sure whether optimize is around back then, but it's the easiest way for me to get users. But then again, like I say, how we gonna optimize it pretty much depend on also like I say the group of users you are engaging. For us, actually, we use things like email, SMS, web push, in-app, and of course app push, which is still a push. So we how should I put it? So the way we optimize it actually is really we look at engagement. Whenever we've done any of this activity, like the email or the in-app, we will actually look at the response, which channel actually engage and which channel do they respond to that. And from there, we continue pursuing it. But we do it in two consideration. First is engagement. The other one is the cost. All right. So in-app, email are usually the most affordable platform. SMS is that probably a channel that will go into the people's phone very directly as long as you pass a DNC, all right, that reach them for sure, all right, but it's actually probably one of the most expensive channel as well. But I say it also depends on your audience. You need to know them good, know them well. The reason because being on a job site, we do have a group of users who are not very email centric. However, they are more WhatsApp centric and SMS centric, and this is actually what we do by looking at our audience and user and profile them accordingly and engage them through the proper channel, and that's how we look at that today.
Interesting. And have you started dabbling into some of the new channels like WhatsApp, etc., or is it on the cards?
Yes. So WhatsApp, we have the SDK in the sense that we have once you're approved, you can have an API whereby actually you can work very closely with your potential partners to put in numbers and engage them through a very automated way, all right, so that we can recommend job directly into the WhatsApp without going through email platform or anything else. It's rather interesting in terms of its engagement, all right. So statistically, maybe some information in terms of because we are fast job, we target generally the non-executive or frontliner. WhatsApp is actually one of the very is one of the platforms that give us the best return. Let's put it this way. So we are also looking at other platforms like Telegram and this and that. So all in all, we are exploring all these different channel online when people communication tools, and we realize that it is effective as compared to some other medium. All right. At the same time, if I were to also look at the other tools, the channel that we use like in-app, SMS, whatever, we must also understand certain of these channels. Some are really more passive, some are really more upfront. SMS is very upfront. I'm going to send it to you. Whereas an in-app, you got to wait for someone to come in. For app push, sometimes if they switch off their notification, there's no way you can reach them. So these are the different considerations you're going to have as well.
Very interesting perspectives there. Thanks, Mark. Vasu, what have you been trying and how have you been formulating your decision making and priorities on these?
Yeah, so it's a fairly, I think Mark touched on most of these aspects. I think it's probably just a simple framework that I kind of use is, first thing is to analyze your customers or rather users, where they are, how they access your platform and which devices do they use and so on, right? And there are like some interesting perspectives that come in. I don't know how many of the audience are in regional roles. There are like specific country level nuances that kind of come in. One interesting nuance that I remember from an earlier stint is we tried email and calls, like actual phone calls. And we did that in India and Singapore. And it was like completely drastically different responses, right? So the users in India are like, I don't do emails, just call me, right? Whereas in Singapore, it's exactly the reverse. Never call me, just email me and I'll be there, right? So all of these kind of interesting nuances can be found in the data. So country nuance is one. Time of the day or day of the week are also certain interesting perspectives, right? So certain points in the day, working hours, certain channels work, and then later when you're outside of work or over weekends, certain other channels work, right? And then you have this perspective of different customer segments. Some of them may be very mobile savvy, some of them may be desktop and so on, which also kind of brings in that thing, right? So Once you analyze and then you segment it, so I don't think there is one channel that works for everybody. The best use of such platforms is that you can segment it and micro segment it rather, and then use one channel, one timing, whatever that suits, right? And the third thing is you experiment and iterate literally infinitely, right? So it becomes like a feedback loop. You run an experiment, you generate some data, and then you analyze, and then the loop kind of completes. So that's probably like one way where you start off from somewhere. Literally, it could be from an email or an SMS, wherever, however rudimentary it is, and then you keep running these, experiments, right? And one perspective that I would love to kind of mention beyond these channels, of course, is the one ignored channel is your own product, right? So we do a lot of trials with push and in-apps and everything, but I think when the user is already there on your platform, that's literally like the golden moment, right? So the amount of in-product engagement and personalization that can happen, I think that really unlocks the potential of both off-platform engagement as well as conversion once they kind of land inside the platform.
That's so true, because oftentimes when I am interacting with brands, they're always looking outside the platform to bring in more people and try to do as much personalization. But when it comes to their owned and operated properties, that's where there's a lot of potential, because you have so much of information about the user itself, right? What are they doing and what are they interacting with you on? So that becomes super crucial. And another important point that you brought up is time of day, day of week. I think thankfully we are at a stage where we've got machine learning algorithms who can actually identify what is the best time for the system to reach out to, say, a Vasu versus a Mark, depending on their usage pattern, and what could also be the best possible content that we should reach out with to both the individuals based on their content patterns or their consumption or their interactions on the apps. So some of these features are already ready for brands to use. Of course, the brands that are going through the maturity levels are stitching up one step at a time and trying to get to the stage where they could use some of these features with us. I think that was quite an insightful session from both Mark and Vasu. Thank you so much today for taking the time out, sharing all these insights, and helping most of the people who are here get some takeaways on how to build an omni-channel experience for our customers. I'd like to now move into another segment where I'll quickly show you how some of these things Vasu and Mark have mentioned are already available for brands to use over a quick 5-minute screen sharing session. But before I do that, Mark, Vasu, thank you so much once again. Pleasure hosting you here. I know we are restricted on time, otherwise we could go talking all day long, but I'll see you sometime in person when things open up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for your time. Have a great day ahead.
Yep.
All right, so for our attendees who are here, I'm just going to very quickly share my screen and walk you through some of the parts which were highlighted by Vasu and Mark. So I think the beginning of all of this could be done through a funnel analysis, where you want to try and understand what the user has been doing once they come on the app, what are some of the steps that they have taken, and where those drop-off points are. So if I have to build a funnel for this, then I have the app site open, which is the first step that I have to begin with. And then I'd like to see product viewed as my next step. My third step could be added to cart. I'm just going to take an e-commerce example here because it's super easy for everyone to relate to. And then finally, order successful, right? So between these 4 steps, what has happened in the past? I can use this as my funnel indicator to come up with a table and see how my users have progressed till the end. So of course, we're looking at 100% number of people who open the app. And then finally, we can see that almost 52% dropped off. We can then see another 55% drop off at the added to cart level. And then the conversion rate, as you can see over here, is quite low compared to what it should have been. And how do we notch this up? So instead of 12%, how do we take it higher? Now, these are some insights which can actually help you act on them very quickly. So if these are the people who dropped off, cart abandoners, as we would call them in the industry, we can instantly click on that, create a segment without having to type anything, because we're quite aware that marketing teams are always busy. So we want to make it as easy as possible for them to act on these insights. So you can simply click on the segmentation element, or you can then also do a campaign from the panel right away. So you could create a push campaign, which could be a one-time push campaign, or even a device triggered campaign, so that we can bring the user back into the funnel. So I think this could be quite an useful strategy for many of the brands. Finally, I also wanted to touch upon, since it's all about omni-channel engagement, I want to touch upon flows. Flows is basically helping create user journeys. It could be onboarding journeys, it could be loyalty journeys. How are we going to put them into these flows, and then how are we going to optimize their experience with us? So of course, it starts off with you building it yourself for a specific use case. So if I have an entry condition as the app opened, then I can go into this particular tool and then start looking at specific conditions. So for example, I want to check if they have done a particular event, which is, say, registered at least once. If they haven't registered, then I want to be able to try and put them into a separate flow. So here I'm going to check on sending them a push notification as an example. When I click into that, I'm able to click the push notification right away, and I can customize it in multiple different ways. Once I do that, I am then able to quickly check on the conditions. They will change automatically as well. So we have to personalize the conditions based on what channels are we using. So here again, we can check whether the user has performed a particular attribute event or not, or have they dismissed the push notification. Imagine if they dismiss the push notification, I want to wait for a day or two. I don't want to bombard my user with another notification or another messaging channel. I can then finally try a different approach, and I can look for emails as my channel. And then again, I can create those with ready-to-use templates or with HTML editors. And having done that, I go back. And based on emails, again, the conditions change. Whether the user has opened an email, clicked an email, or they've had a hard bounce, which means this person doesn't even exist anymore. So this is some ways in which one could create a journey flow and can go across multiple channels. Finally, you also want to think of ways in which you want to be able to control these journeys, right? So one might feel, hey, Anmol, but between apps and between webs, emails or SMSs, how do we know which is the channel which is working quite well for a particular user? So instead of using our mental capacity to try and map all of this, we've of course got AI to do it. Let the AI do it. Nowadays, anything complex, let the AI do it. So here you've got something called as intelligent path optimizer, which can actually create two branches, and then the user can dynamically be pushed through a specific branch which is performing well. So I might create a branch with email, and then within email also I might create a couple of different A/B testing variations. And then on a real-time basis, based on the user's interaction, the user starts being pushed into that specific branch, as opposed to the static A/B testing, where you are manually controlling the exposure to a specific set of audiences, and then based on that sample, you're making everything move 100% into that. Things have changed now. It's become more real time. It's become more AI powered. So here we don't have to work on those static assumptions. Of course, when you do click into any of these, you get detailed stats about the user's journey, which are listed out over here. So you can see the total trips they've made, what sort of conversions have we received, what sort of channels did the user engage on. You can get channel specific data as well. So this can also give you insights. Finally, you could also download this information and also do your in-depth analytics if you are someone like Vasu who loves numbers. I wanted to share this very quickly with the audience so that they can also have a visual representation of some things that we have discussed in today's call. I'll be happy to reach out to people and talk to you about your specific challenges, because every brand is unique. And like we discovered in the call, there's no one size fits for all. We have a tool which can do multiple things, but we'd like to understand first, what are your objectives, what are your priorities, and how we can help you achieve those. So that brings us to the end of today's session. I'm just quickly going to check if we have any questions coming in from us, from the audience for us. I don't see any questions. We've got a quick minute. Does anyone have? Yes, I think there is one question. All right. We will wait while you type. There is a question in the box. Okay. All right. So we've got a question from Reza. How are personalized coupons for each user group handled within different journeys or communications? Is a separate promotion management solution required to integrate in the tech stack? Example, Voucherify, so that the correct promotions are fed into the comms. Otherwise, how can it be handled on the product side? Asking this from the marketing side. Okay, maybe Vasu, I can get your help, because you all must be doing a lot of vouchers and promotions for customers on your digital platforms. Are you able to shed some light on how we can utilize this as part of the journeys?
Yeah, so a couple of perspectives, right? And again, like there are multiple answers to this. So one is, of course, the whole manual way of doing it. Today, I have a promo, I generate a voucher and there's an approval process and so on. Then you have the other extreme, which is like reasonably programmatic, where you have a promotion service on your tech stack and then you kind of work with them. And again, this could be inbuilt, whereby you have a simple interface where you can create your segment or input a segment and then give a particular voucher, and then it auto generates code. And then you also have the kind of a third-party solutions that I think Reza was mentioning, where it kind of helps you do the exact same thing, right? So you can integrate any of your segments, then break it down and also create different kind of voucher. And then there are different kind of parameters, whether it's a percentage off, it's an absolute value, multiple different kind of promo constructs which kind of go in, and then it could be personalized, right? So depending on, again, like where you are and how much of time and investment you can do, you can go for any of these options.
Superb. I think if we have to also include some of these promotions, these can of course be utilized as part of the journey. There are some specific organizations, like you're mentioning Voucherify, which are basically and just adding to the answer for Reza, which are basically organizations who specialize in this, so they are able to actually have a more engaging way to reach out to the customer with these vouchers. They have a voucher program. Whoever utilizes, they have ability to track it and report on those. You can definitely bring this as part of the journey flows from another vendor into the flows that I showed you earlier. Happy to, of course, show you how this can be done when we can take it offline. But thank you so much, Reza, for your question. I think that brings us to, that was the last question, I believe. All right. I do see a notification, and I think we've answered that live. All right. So I don't think we've got any more questions. You're very welcome, Reza. Thanks, Vasu, for jumping into that question. I thought it would be useful to hear it from a practitioner who actually uses a lot of vouchers and see how that's deployed. We'll bring this conversation to a close. It was a great afternoon session with both of you all. Once again, thank you for joining us. Quite insightful, and thank you for all the attendees for taking the time out today. And I'll probably be reaching out to some of you all to see how we can help you later on.